and you can see the inside. When you're on top of the roof, you wouldn't imagine that actually if you go in, you have this other world, but the building is complex, and it's full of humor. Yeah. In a way, that is not so different from the growing consciousness about the importance of the land. I show you this in order to show you another example of new conditions. By conditions, I don't mean just environmental conditions, I mean total cultural, social conditions. Awareness. This one, I think, maybe many of us recognize, disused rail lines in New York. And what do you think? An important part of those same conditions, understanding them, is that soon after this was done, it was taken over, so to speak, by the same tendency for gentrification that is responsible for some very noticeable phenomena towards the degradation of cities, but we can talk about that at another time. It certainly should figure in the studies of anyone who is focusing on urbanization issues. The last slides, which we will go about a bit more slowly. I asked Patrick for advice. Do we have enough time? About 15 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Then we don't rush through this. Why? Because I thought I would end with recollection of the primal conditions. These are not processed. They have not found their way through the financial system, through the governmental system, and many other norms and traditions to be very well-formed architecture. Children playing on the street are children playing on the street. These are at the beginning of time, even though the picture is only 2 months old. But in a way, history has different paces in different parts of the world. But still, the origin is that, if we are designing for it. And then, it is this, which then turns into very fine and refined parts of the world. They become Paris, they become London, they become Vienna, they become Johannesburg, they become New York. But the beginning of time, yeah, these people are living now, yeah, in Park Fulam as it happens. You want to go and see it and say, so this is how it begins. People don't have a lot. They have to find materials left over on streets and build a shelter for themselves. And gradually they begin to develop through history a different sense of aesthetics. Maybe some critics will call what they're doing deconstructivism. Maybe some developer will come and invest a lot of money, but you can play out that history in your own mind. But this contains the beginnings in its very root modesty. And the basicness of how people cook and eat is important for us to remember. If we want to understand the beauty of a magnificent, dining room, yeah, in a 5-star hotel, that is the beginning of understanding. We won't understand it, we won't be able, therefore, architecturally to define it by just going to those dining rooms. You see? That's my suggestion to you, and it may well be wrong. And speaking of changing conditions, we should remember that even though this is not visible to us every day, it is an existing condition surrounding our world. By all means, we may have built it away from Hong Kong, we may have kept it away from Europe, but it is there. It is in the clouds, and it's threatening the conditions that we regard as the ennobling conditions under which architecture can make its contribution. So we go on and read and talk about sustainability. We should remember the baseline. And of course, what we do will reach the high points. Fortunately, in the complex world, both scenarios are playing out. Can you contain both in your one idea? Well, it's important to do that. That is what takes work, that's what takes research, it takes examination and continuing definition by drawing up scenarios, one after another. Remember the questions I had put on the screen at the beginning. Let's suggest some answers to them so that we can ourselves in discussion lay them out. That the quality of a thesis is a measure of the mastery in identifying the key issues and defining them as a basis for architectural design. That the process is a patient search, a search of discovery, to paraphrase Le Corbusier, in what architecturally we would rightly call research and design. The power of the thesis lies in its potency, the boldness, the strength of its vision that is not compromised. Remember Larousse and Koolhaas and the library in Ireland and the many, many, many other very important works. That is our legacy. We need to keep that in mind, and if we need to keep a history book next to us, a record of what has happened, let it be. But I have a feeling that many of us may not do that. And the last sentence there, what is the measure of quality? It's the reach of imagination. It's beyond how many facts we have absorbed. The reach of imagination that actually soars above all of that. Remember Wallace Stevens, in the face of pressing facts, imagination tends to fall short. That is something we have to struggle with, exercise our imagination, so that it rises up to the level necessary for what here I have called artistic mastery. I use the word artistic mastery with this intention, to say that when all is said and done, the work needs to have a quality of art. It must be serious, but not somber. It must have humor. It must have beauty. And we must remember that pleasure is an important part of its creation and its experience. And so, again, we need to go beyond our own limits, which may be technical or anything else. That is really where we need to pause quite a bit to have a sense of what were all those ideas in the past about proportion, rhythm, harmony, and new ideas in new aesthetics, ideas in the modern movement before they were misunderstood and misrepresented by critics who were in a hurry to get published. And the work of people now who are searching, not only in architectural terms, but in terms of literature, music, science, all of which share that beauty, humor in them as well as seriousness. In fact, one could argue that without the humor, you would not have seriousness. By all means, you would have somberness, almost like death. Finally, I want to register reservations against what I've written here as overproduction. If you take the time to look at some of the work you have seen in this school, and I have seen a lot of work in other schools, I'm sure any of us who have looked have seen, there is this tendency for overproduction, like a lecture that goes too long, like this one. and many people who labor their points because they think, oh, this is so important, I'll say it 10 more times. You need to focus. If you have something to say it, as the advice was in the red little book on how to write. If you have something to say it. And if you don't have, well, get out of the way. Focus is essential to the quality of the thesis. And finally, if there is something of quality, it's good to remember Chekhov's reminder. Don't tell me the moon is shining, but just saying something is happening. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. Thank you very much.
Maybe, may I invite Kelly? Thomas, maybe sit up there. Or maybe four. Can I check the light? Okay. It's just one good. Okay.
I've got a good question. The Chekhov quote is from which play?
From
Which play? Which
I don't know. I don't know. I just thought it speaks so importantly to at this point. That is to say, you don't say, you show. Yeah. But I could find it because it's been a while since I took it out. Yeah.
I thought it was a beautiful quote.
Well, yeah. I mean, in a way, we could say the same thing. We could say the same thing through many other quotations. But in a way, it's nice to share to bring in other friends. Yeah, like in this case, to bring Chekhov to join us. That's why I put it that way. Yeah. And it also reminds me of the thing of the joke that Basquiat, the important artist from New York, writing on one of his graffitis, to say, write whatever you want, and if you put under it the name of an important philosopher, then people will think that's important. And under the sun, Plato. So I could have said that myself, but I wouldn't have put Essy. I would have still put Chekhov. But that is a genuine quotation.
Yes. According to Mr. Google, Chekhov wrote this in a letter to his brother, who is an aspiring writer. Some way.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I'll talk about his show.
Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, but I thought the quote is not only the showing, but also the two things. Like everyone reading the quote should also think for themselves what it means in terms of architecture, in terms of spatial, material, quality.
Absolutely.
Right? The idea of embodiment. I think they should think about the quote and get what they can from the quote themselves, rather than.
You see, there are two sides to it. Thanks for that, Thomas. As now we know, thanks to Nelson, he was writing to his brother, to a writer. So he was saying something that we learn in classes on poetry. That is, we don't talk about qualities of something, like a beautiful face. We describe it, we, so to speak, show it. But as a matter of fact, in our profession, we really have to have to make it visible. And of course, that brings to mind Wittgenstein's observation about the nature of language. That is to say, what can be shown cannot be said. Yes.
Essy.
Yes, please.
Interesting. Usually come to this lecture, I expect you maybe show diagrams or this. You didn't show any diagram. But all you showed is a building. So when you talk about what is the systems, actually is the quality of design embedded in the design itself, right? And so that means actually it's not just now this is the final year we call the systems. It should be also before, right? We have a studio project. That's the target, right? We should achieve something. It's not just the design and it has certain quality, has a topic, it has things to explore.
Thank you for that.
I guess that's what do you want to say? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
I can understand.
You see, myself, we have spoken about this before, although we haven't said it in these ways. Myself, I think the thesis begins at the first year.
I think so.
And we do nothing of any significance that lacks thesis. That's what I was saying. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So if we continue, right,
Absolutely.
to think along these lines, I think if now we have a problem with systems, with this final year, actually it could be the problem is before, right? You said the systems should start from first year. So I think there's something to think about is overall our education is not just how to do the last year, because we never mentioned the term systems in the previous years, because the term is only come in the last year. So everyone maybe understand that should be something new. I guess the student also thinking about it. Also, before the final systems, actually all the teaching is by one term. Now we have a 1 year. So that's another problem, right? If we could achieve what do you call the system quality in our design, we need really 1 year to do it again. Right? So possibly we can still do it, achieve within 1 term. Right? Because before there's always 1 term. Right? If we already successfully achieved that target,
Yes.
so we should be able to do it within 1 term.
Yes.
Now if you have 1 year, now students start the issue with sociology, psychology, everyone dealing with dream and nightmare or whatever. Right? Then very slowly try to get to the point. But when you start to dealing with design, actually the weakness immediately become a problem, because maybe our problem is we cannot design.
Well, let's hope. I hear you, as they say in Scotland. Let's hope that one can play out these ideas and they find their way into our general thinking and general conduct. They're in the air, for sure. They're in the air, and let's see what our student colleagues in the room do by way of their position with regards to these issues. But in a way, they should be a part of our general discourse, for sure.
Because if you just try to understand your point.
Absolutely,
For
thank
example,
you for that. Yes.
As
you know,
you
myself.
mentioned, let's say, the thesis should not be professional work like in office, right? In the office, if you do a project, you satisfy the client, and maybe everything is worked out, but it's still just a regular project, because we are trying to do is systems. That means a design which has something beyond that. Right? if you think about, let's say,
Well,
for example, if the work, if I do a nice design and satisfy client's need, but maybe it's not to the level you can publish in journal, right? If you publish something in the journal, you need to have something beyond just a good design.
yeah, you see, myself, I believe that, as I said, every design of distinction has a thesis, many theses. One hopes that that is the quality of the work that we do in offices. Do we always manage? On the other hand, the presentation of the thesis is something that one can strategize, you know. We don't draw everything. We strategically draw concisely and quickly, effectively, the general parts of a design, and then really illuminate the thesis part. For example, I can imagine that if Sharon were going to draw the Philharmonie, the stress would have been on that section, you know, and showing how one accommodates the various functions, kind of stuff. But it's true. Please, please.
In partial response to Professor
Please.
And I really appreciate the presentation that you shared with us today. But the first statement you made, I had a slight disagreement with, which is when you said a thesis is not a project of a professional practice in an office. But I think there are occasions when it can and should be. Those are the works of distinction.
Yes.
So you can say the thesis is not typically found in a work of professional
Yes.
practice.
Yes.
And I would even make the slight distinction that in our industry you have many architectural businesses and a handful of architectural practices, both in the commercial realm.
Right, right.
But, you know,
Thank you for that, yes. My intention was not to have suggested that therefore the architectural practices was, you know, we don't present a thesis the same way as a project in an office needs to be presented. Because there's a comprehensiveness about that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that.
But in that respect, you know, it's developing that attitude, and I hope that's an attitude that our students will retain when they enter into practice.
Well, in a way, it can, Nelson, wouldn't you say, in a way, if we just take this one issue, wouldn't you think that it could effectively play out in our conversations in the studios?
Exactly.
Like, I'm a student. I am beginning to make models, and I'm beginning to make the renderings because I'm so good with using the hardware, software. And then he comes along and says, Essy, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing? You know, show your design quickly, and then let's get on to what's important in your view, because that's going to take a lot of time. In a way, the same way as we went through the first slides, the first 70 slides quickly, in order to have time to dwell on the same way. It takes it, but I don't see why that conversation cannot be a part of our conversations in the studios this very term. You know, it's not necessary for us to let students ourselves go on making these extensively laborious models that are not to the point, or a lot of colored renderings that prove nothing, they demonstrate nothing, and in fact they are highly, may I say humbly, they are highly questionable, because it's not given that they are based on any real rigorous investigation. They are really advertising design. We should not be doing that. But we do it, and we pin it up. And so people are so kind, or they don't see, they come and they don't say, well, why did you spend all this? They don't say, they say, how wonderful. The people you copied in these perspectives are lovely. Shouldn't do that. Yes.
I think this is very important for you students. I'd like to see a bit more your comments on what Professor Essy showed today. I think it was very, very interesting. Some key points you
Excuse me, could you speak up a bit, please?
okay, sorry. I think you showed many interesting things, many interesting points. No, one I would like to explore a bit more because it can be useful for them to making off of around the project and thesis. You talk about the process of the thesis as a discovery process, no, and at some point you link with some